In February of 1993, Richard Hutton would write in The Cricketer that cricket now is the province of third world politicians whose concern for the good of the game is subservient to their lust for power and influence. So why exactly was this guy so mad? Well, it was cause just a few days back, those very same third world politicians had humiliated England in front of the world. They had taken the schism England had created for their own benefit and turned it on its head. They had taken the rule they had made to protect themselves and converted it into a noose that was soon gonna hang their reign. And today, we are gonna tell that story. The story of the day ICC was killed and made to born anew by 3 third world politicians. And it begins with the power of a veto, a power that ICC's founding members had given themselves all the way back in 1909. That wasn't the ICC that you know now though. Back then it was called the Imperial Cricket Conference, and that word, imperial, that's what it was all about. This wasn't a platform to promote cricket, but to promote British authority through cricket. At that time, years of colonization had seen the English spread across the world, creating a lot of distance from their imperial roots. So ICC was to be a political foreign policy tool to bring together all dispersed Englishmen under the banner of cricket, which just happened to be under the auspices of the British imperial authority. And that's why when MCC, that's the organization that actually created the ICC, when they chose members for it, they only selected from England's colonies, namely Australia and South Africa, while completely ignoring countries like Denmark and Netherlands, who had a substantial cricket playing population. And when in a few years' time, when they decided to expand to other colonies, they would make sure that everyone understood the difference between the masters and the subjects, putting in a rule in place that said the 3 founding members had the power to veto any decision made by the rest of the world. Basically meaning no matter how many nations they would add henceforth, may it be full members who had a say in how the ICC run, or the associate nations who already didn't have much power, neither of them could do anything to shake the founding members' powers. And as and when needed, they would remind the rest of the world of this fact. From blocking the idea of neutral umpires to stopping the inclusion of Zimbabwe as a full member. Even when nations would call for South Africa's ban due to their open segregation policy against blacks and Indians, it would just be vetoed down. South Africa just getting away with their vetoes getting taken away. Now yes, in time they would be banned, but suffice to say that all of this had created a lot of discontentment among the ICC's non-white countries. It was to the point that by 1987, many countries had started taking concrete steps to remove this veto. But even after a 15-month-long, 21-meeting wide investigation, all it achieved in the end was the MCC head was separated from the ICC head, which was then just handed over to another Englishman. So you can understand why, in spite of promises and assurances, in spite of resolution of changes, many of the non-white countries saw the ICC as the colonial branch of the MCC, still being run from a small office in the corner of MCC even after a century of its creation. And so, come 2nd February of 1993, this anger was to boil over, starting from an agreement that they had reached a year back. Henceforth, the World Cup was to be rotated among all countries, with England declaring that the next turn was theirs. Now, it's important to note that none of this was binding, nothing was written down or signed, they had just declared their intention, and at that moment, nobody had bothered to fight back. And it wouldn't have mattered much if not for South Africa rejoining the ICC and declaring, in the interest of democracy, they should at least be allowed to take part in the vote. In other words, they wanted the World Cup venue to be put up to a vote, opening up the door for other nations to join the fight. And the very first one to pounce on this opportunity would be Neil Perera, the Sri Lankan board president. Harboring designs on an all-Asian World Cup since 1991, armed with this newfound opportunity, he would barge into the offices of the heads of Indian and Pakistani board, where India would quickly agree, while Pakistan would shoot it down, saying that they wanted both the nations to support their solo bid this time. Now, Perera, being confident that he would get Pakistan to change his mind, decided to go ahead with the bid, which seemed to match England's in each and every aspect except one critical point. They were offering a lot more money to the associate nations. And this caused the entire English media en masse to accuse them of bribery, causing such a media storm that even countries that had no connection to cricket were beginning to take notice. Now let's just ignore the fact for a minute that this was in the end an auction where people were supposed to attract votes by putting forward a financial proposition. And let's just also ignore the fact that if the World Cup was to be rotated, then England, having already hosted it 3 times, should now have had to wait till everybody else finished their turns. But what was the most egregious point here was that just 3 years back, Australia, with England's support, had used this exact same tactic to win the hosting of 1992 World Cup. But that wasn't bribery, that was just auction. But when India did it, that was sadly enough, by the time the actual meeting was to come around, all that media heat would just disappear, because news would break that Pakistan had decided to move forward with their solo bid, resulting in India and Sri Lanka deciding to support South Africa. The final tally being England 4, South Africa 4, Pakistan 1. An abject humiliation to Pakistan. So once again, Pereira would approach them, trying to convince them to relent. And though initially they would hum and ha, they would finally accept reality, deciding to go forward with the bid. So when the second round of voting would begin, and South Africa, on getting assurances from England that the next World Cup would be theirs, would pull out its bid, there would be only 2 candidates left. 5 to England, 4 to Asia. But then you had most of the 16 associate nations already supporting Asia, so you would think it would be an easy victory for them, right? Well, back then, in 1989, the moment Australia's hosting rights were confirmed, they had gone and changed the very rules of voting. Henceforth, all major decisions will require a simple majority of all members, a 2/3 majority of all full members, in which at least one of the founding members had to be included. Meaning, even if you brought the entire cricketing world together, unless England and Australia agreed to it, you couldn't do anything. So in spite of having the majority vote on their side, it was England, with their veto in their back pocket and 1 vote away from the 2/3 full members majority, that started pushing Zimbabwe to turn over their vote. The same country that they had vetoed against becoming a full member, whom they had provided no help whatsoever, was now being pressurized to join their side. So India quickly pushed back, tabling a proposal to revert the voting into a simple majority one. England responded with yeah, you can do that. It just won't be binding, that's all. To which India responded with a motion stating that nowhere in the law has it been mentioned that hosting venue voting is a major decision. Hence, it should not be subjected to a 2/3 requirement a simple majority vote would do. To which England accused India of misinterpreting the law, to which they just said, look, nobody among here is a lawyer. So let's just adjourn for now and we will set up a conference call with the Chief Justice of India. Let him interpret the law for us. Knowing full well that parity would dictate that any law reading from the Chief Justice of a nation would require someone of a similar stature to counter. And if the English board tried to summon their own country's Chief Justice, they would be laughed out of the room. So obviously, England refused, denying any outside interference in the matter. So back to the argument they went, which would eventually lead to a gridlock, followed by a request to adjourn, followed by a call for conference, and on and on and on and on. Basically what was happening was that England, so used to remaining high up above, hadn't bothered to take stock of who exactly they were actually dealing with. You have Madhav Sindhia, a cabinet minister and the president of BCCI. You had Jagmohan Dalmia, the millionaire that was going to rule the BCCI and the ICC for the next decade. And then there was I.S. Bindra, a senior civil servant, the next BCCI president and a former secretary to the President of India. All 3 astute politicians, well versed in the dark, murky waters of Indian politics. So they knew very well that yes, without England's assent, they couldn't win. But the very rules England had set up made it so that without their consent, neither could they. But whereas they didn't have anything to lose, England, who had publicized to the world how they were rightfully gonna host the next World Cup, and then they couldn't make it happen, then it would be a grand humiliation. A declaration to the world that the throne that they had been desperately trying to protect had long since been swiped from under them. So on and on the meeting would go. On and on would England come short. As the clock turned 12, they finally realized what the Indian contingent already knew. The only way out was a compromise, which then took the form of India will take the 1996 World Cup, while England will take the 1999 one, along with the agreement that voting to decide World Cup venue was to be completely abolished. Now this may seem like a pretty one-sided compromise, but the idea was if the Asian bloc continues to move together, then they could use this method to interfere in all future votes. So in effect, by giving up this World Cup, they were getting a guarantee that this trick could never be performed again. Basically giving up on the battle to take away the opponent's chief weapon. And this could have been it. Both could have walked away from it, if not happy, then at least satisfied. And all that unpleasantness that had happened behind closed doors could have remained buried behind it. Yes, England would get some flack, but the press line of "we have withdrawn" in a most magnanimous, decent and wonderful gesture, along with the guarantee of the next World Cup, would surely have smoothened things out. But then, Alan Smith, the representative from England, would take the mic and go off. We endured a fractious and unpleasant meeting. It was beset by procedural wrangling and by a long way was the worst meeting I ever attended. There seemed to be a grave danger of ICC disintegrating. Therefore, in the best interest of the game, England ultimately agreed to withdraw their submission, meaning the despicable India had nearly caused world cricket to fracture and we were the ones to save it. You can guess, there was no way anybody was going to take this lying down. So on came the reply from Imran Khan, the Pakistani representative no less. Yes, it was an unpleasant meeting, but it became like that only because of the inconsistencies England had created. They had changed the rule. It had ceased being a democratic process, and that is where the problem lay. And this would mark a reopening of war. The battlefield simply shifting from the boardroom into the media. Both sides now desperate to control the narrative. The Daily Telegraph would write, all of this is a result of money and politics, to which they would be reminded of how ICC itself had begun as a political organization. When the subcontinent's unpreparedness, lack of amenities, threats of terrorism and widespread murders was raised, I.S. Bindra would come out fighting and say that not a single bag of luggage was lost or misplaced during the entire 1987 World Cup. And then there was Richard Hutton, who along with that statement would say that many of these administrators from these associate countries just happened to be from India, completely ignoring the fact that they had been put there by the Britishers themselves to manage their crumbling empire, pulling Indians away from their home in a desperate bid to find capable administrators. So suffice to say, as the war went on, both the sides through years of their history showed just the amount of mud that they had ready to fling on the other, finally reaching to a reckoning on one single point. As it stood now, the cricketing world was divided between the old and the new, between the east and the west. And if things were allowed to continue the same way, it would only be a matter of time before everything blew up. So level-headed minds from both the sides would finally open up to a dialogue through back channels and backroom parties, finally coming to understand their greatest point of contention, the veto. You cannot claim to have equality if there are some who are more equal than others. For any reconciliation to happen, they literally had to level the playing field. The veto had to go. And so we had that within half a year of that meeting, within months of the media uproar dying down, ICC, in a quite subdued meeting, would decide to abolish the veto, along with completely separating the ICC from the MCC, changing the organization's name and electing Walcott, a West Indian, history's first non-white person to become the chairman of the ICC. A new era in cricket had begun, and whatever was to come next, may it be good, may it be bad, it would happen because the nations made it so, not because history had deemed it so. Now, as some of you may already know, the anger of this humiliation, along with the anger of the veto being abolished, it meant that England wasn't going to let this go. So many controversies, so many scandals, to even one point that India had to save Sri Lanka from being boycotted by the rest of the world. If you want to hear any of this, do let me know in the comments. Till then, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you had a good day. Thank you for watching.